In recent years, there has been a revolution in how our citizens exercise their right to vote. Instead of every American showing up in person, more and more Americans are choosing to vote by mail, using absentee ballots, no excuse absentee voting, or in the case of my home state of Oregon, the entire election is conducted by mail. This amendment that I will be offering and I'm discussing this morning, that I join Senator Feinstein and other colleagues in, is designed to protect the millions of Americans who choose to use the post office to exercise their right to vote. This amendment protects those millions of Americans from any kind of postal delay that could disrupt their ability to ensure that their vote is counted. Now, Madam President, my home state of Oregon has a system in which all ballots are cast by mail. In Oregon, if the ballots are not delivered by mail to the county election offices by the deadline on election night, they are not counted. So it's essential to the conduct of fair elections in my home state that delivery of ballots cast by mail not be delayed. To prevent the potential threat to our elections from delayed mail delivery, the Wyden-Feinstein amendment would place a moratorium on the closure of postal facilities until November 13, 2012, in states that vote by mail or allow any voter to vote no excuse absentee. It would also require the Postal Service to notify election officials of closings and consolidations, and require that the Postal Service study the effect of closing or consolidating a mail processing facility on the ability of the affected community to vote by mail. Jordan Valley, located in beautiful eastern Oregon on the Nevada border, is 457 miles from Portland. With the proposed consolidations, the nearest regional processing center would literally be almost 500 miles away. If the United States Postal Service goes ahead with their proposed closures and consolidations, then a ballot cast in Jordan Valley could travel approximately 1,000 miles before it reaches the hands of elected officials. This is unacceptable for constituents who vote in the far corners, the rural corners of my state. Cuts to the Postal Service mean that ballots mailed in the final days before an election may not get to election officials in time to be counted. Ballots sent the weekend before a Tuesday vote may not get into the hands of election officials by the present-day deadline of Election Day. Closing and consolidating postal facilities disproportionately harms the ability of rural residents to have their votes counted. Now, these issues raise important questions. Are closing postal facilities in states that primarily vote by mail a responsible approach? For me and many of my constituents and the millions of Americans who've chosen to vote this fashion, the resounding answer is no, this is not a responsible approach. Closing processing facilities and potentially impacting the delivery of ballots in a general election is a risk not worth it. Closing postal facilities will have unintended and unforeseen consequences on the impact of elections. So that's why this amendment would place a moratorium on the closure of postal facilities until November 13, 2012 in states that conduct all their elections by mail or permit no excuse absentee voting to ensure that elections are fair. No excuse voting, Madam President, of course, allows any voter to vote absentee without having to offer additional reasons for their making that choice. Placing a moratorium until after the election will ensure that what is done here in the United States Senate does not negatively impact voting in Oregon, California, or the scores of other states that make extensive use of mail ballots in their elections. I hope, Madam President, it'll be possible for us to win bipartisan support for the proposition that ensuring the highest level of voting participation in our country is fundamental to our democracy. I hope my colleagues will support the amendment that I intend to offer later with my colleague and friend from California, Senator Feinstein, to protect the millions of Americans who choose to vote by mail.